Oh yeah, you've had some good weather.
Not good for moisture, but it's good for your construction.
Paula,
what's your dress?
Paula,
What's your dress
over there?
What's that?
Amazing job, man.
Oh, yeah. What?
They didn't have
No.
I'm sorry.
I live out. Yeah. Don't. Trash. You ain't seen the trash pick up for it? It's pitiful. No? It's up on John's property. And he's one of those. Harbor master. That's what he did. That road, blowers at the blowers at the wastewater treatment plant. Blowers at the field, running there. Bearing came out. It's a mix of trash. And a right contract. 47. Yeah, 4,000. It's okay to put you in. We're going to be fixing one back school. Yeah. With bricks and stuff. Sewer fund. You got it. You need to see the picture? We did. So yeah, those things. It is. It's already small. Yeah.
I remember them burning it that day.
Well, they'll be able to clean that up.
I like that, right?
It's gonna, that's what his land. John's land. It'd be like dumping on your land.
I stole her pension.
Oh,
I thought maybe she'd given out her secret pharmacy pen for Christmas.
No,
You come to the store, only with prescriptions.
Been trespassing since 1492. Out here.
That's why you got the
You know, but we living with it though. You know, we living with it.
That guy with MSM ever call you yet? Back?
I did. I found a couple sales guy. That guy was a technical technician.
Oh, okay.
And they're just up to their ears and busy. At the end of the year, somebody will work.
Oh. Good.
Well, now I don't. I used to.
All right, it's 7 o'clock. I'd like to welcome you all to the December 21st City of DeSoto City Council meeting. Let's start with roll call, please.
Lane.
Here.
McDaniel.
Here.
Walker.
Here?
Ritter.
Here.
Murdoch.
Here.
All present except the mayor is absent.
Okay, I'd invite you all to please rise and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. first item tonight is the consent agenda, which includes the approval of our minutes from the council meeting of December 7th, approval of pay ordinance number 821, approval of resolution declaring city boundaries for 2018, approval of cereal malt beverage applications for 2018, and approval of ordinance 2434 incorporating debt management policy into the city code. Any questions or comments about the consent agenda?
That'll be resolution 945.
Motion?
I'll make a motion that we approve the consent agenda resolution 945.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Lane.
Yes.
Ritter.
Yes.
McDaniel.
Yes.
Murdoch.
Yes.
Walker.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, our next item is call to public. I guess before us do that, I think our sign-up sheet was out just a little bit late, so if you didn't get a chance to sign the sign-in sheet when you came into the meeting, please make sure you do that before you leave tonight. We appreciate a record of your visit here. Call to public. Members of the public are welcome to use this time to comment about any matter relating to city business that's not listed on tonight's agenda. The comments discussed under call to public may or may not be acted on by the council during this meeting. There's a 4-minute time limit. Please stand and be recognized. State your name and address. And anybody wishing to speak about the rezoning issue will be discussed later, so that wouldn't need to take place under call to public. So any other matters? Anyone wish to address the council? Okay, seeing none, we'll move on. We have no old business, so new business, number 4A. Consider ordinance 2435 rezoning 29145 West 83rd Street from residential suburban to residential agriculture. Brad?
All right. Thank you, council, and good evening, everyone. Before you is agenda item 4A is the mayor-elect just mentioned his rezoning request from RO residential suburban to RA residential agriculture. Planning Commission discussed this recommendation for rezoning at their previous Planning Commission meeting on November 28th. Subject property is located at 83rd Street and Cedar Creek Road. The address, or the escapes at this moment, it's in your staff report. The request is being made by Ron Keith of Arbor Masters, who recently purchased the property. And according to state statutes and our own zoning regulations, such zoning requests require the Planning Commission to hold a public hearing on the issue, which has been completed, and then make a recommendation to the City Council for final action. Included in your packets tonight are the application requests, included as Exhibit A, the minutes from the Planning Commission meeting, Exhibit B, and then the proposed ordinance is drafted by the city attorney. Also included in your packet is a map of the subject property and an aerial photo of the surrounding tracts of this location. The Planning Commission held a public hearing on the matter on November 28, 2017, during which time about a dozen or so citizens voiced some strong concerns about potential mulching activity that came up. The topic came up during the discussion of the rezoning. As far as going through some of the public hearing, discussion, and feedback, the applicant stated that he intends to use the property for agriculture and forestry use and wishes to rezone the property to bring it more in line with the intended and historical uses that have occurred on the tract. The applicant is allowed some protection as an agricultural use by Kansas state statutes, and a tree farm operation falls under those statutes. He also enjoys a grandfather clause because he's using that in a historical role that had been previously been on the property for several years. It also appears that no rezoning actually would be required for the new owner to continue the agricultural use on the property. But as stated, the applicant made the rezoning request to bring all the tracts in line with the intended use for the property. During the public hearing by the Planning Commission, much of the discussion came upon the potential mulching activity mentioned by the applicant while explaining his thoughts and ideas for the use of the property. However, during that meeting, the applicant also disclosed his primary activity will involve planting new trees, removing dead and diseased trees, harvesting new trees on site. These activities will also support the applicant's tree service and landscape business. The site will not be a retail outlet for commercial sales, nor will the applicant live in the house that is on the tract. The applicant discussed selling Christmas trees on the site and is currently doing so, and also potentially having a farmer's market during the summer months. He also expressed a desire to operate a mulching operation on the portion of the property lying east of Cedar Creek. This is where much of the Planning Commission meeting discussion happened on the 28th. The concerns noted by the neighbors were potential noise from the mulching equipment on site, truck traffic on Cedar Creek Road, unsightliness of a potential brush pile on the project site as well. The applicant described that a brush pile could get up to about 5 acres in size. Currently, the inclusion of the mulching is just his conjecture. It's something that the applicant mentioned. It was not his primary intent to mulch on the site. It was just more of an offshoot of his business activities. Since then, staff has had an opportunity to investigate what would constitute an agricultural use on the site. In staff's opinion, and it's been reviewed by our city attorney, that mulching for trees that were generated on the site would be allowed. However, bringing in trees and dead limbs from off-site would not be allowed. It's subject to a special use permit process. So we did get to the bottom of that, and Patrick, if you've got anything to add to that, feel free to brief the council on that. I'm going to go through some of the general zoning requirements for the RO tract and the residential agricultural tract. The RO tract is intended for large lot, single-family residences. Under this condition, they would have to be 1 acre and larger because there's no city sanitary sewer lines nearby. The existing uses within this tract, within about 300 feet, are all large lot, residential, suburban, single-family homes, R1, with some residential agriculture as well. Uses within the RA zoning include single-family dwellings, crop production, forestry, logging, horse boarding, nursing care, and group facilities. The intent of the RA zoning is to allow for single-family homes and residential development with a minimum of 10 acres per unit, and of course agricultural use. In review of the zoning compatibility factors, I'm not going to go through each one of these. I'm just going to highlight some of the more pertinent ones. Is compatibility of the proposed zoning and uses permitted therein with the zoning and uses of nearby properties. The proposed zoning is equally in line with the surrounding zoning and land uses. R1, RO, and RA are the predominant zoning districts in the area. The extent that there is a need in the community for the uses allowed in the proposed zoning, there really is no truly community-based need. However, the site has been vacant for several years. As part of our overall development plan, business activity is something that the city encourages, and having a business operating out there would be beneficial to the city as a whole. The availability of utilities in the area is limited to a public water line. The city of DeSoto has a 8-inch main that runs along 83rd Street. That line does serve the property. There is a tract on the east side of Cedar Creek, which is served by Water District 1. So there'd be no impact to the city's water system under this situation. Private wastewater will be handled by a septic system. Public service accommodations, including police, fire, and parks, schools, will see little change from this zoning request. To the extent that the uses allowed in the proposed zoning district would adversely affect the capacity or safety of that portion of the street network, influenced by the uses or present parking problems in the vicinity of the property. There are no parking problems in the vicinity of the property. All parking of vehicles that are coming onto the site for the Christmas tree sales are required to be on-site. There's no on-street parking. As we know, 83rd Street is a busy arterial, and on-street parking is not allowed, nor would there be parking allowed on Cedar Creek Road for any kind of activity. To the extent the zoning amendment may detrimentally affect nearby property, again, we're just focusing on zoning. The residential uses nearby are large tract homes. None of them touch or are directly adjacent to the site. A change to RA would not change the property values of the residents nearby. There is a significant amount of homes, and also currently just to the west of the site is a large agricultural use. The consistency of the comprehensive plan, utilities, facility plans, capital improvement plans, and area plans, all these are staff has evaluated and indicates that a favorable recommendation to the Planning Commission and also the City Council. The future land use map is probably our most effective tool in looking at this, and the proposed use is consistent with the future land use plan. In conclusion, we'd like to recommend approval to this, staff's approval to this. This is, once again, a rezoning request, and the issues of things that may happen on site will be subject to a special use permitting process, regardless of whether council approves the rezoning request tonight or not. We would still be watching the site and making sure the applicant uses the property with his intended agricultural activities. And it just as part of the staff report, zoning decisions cannot be conditional. They're either approved, denied, or remanded to the Planning Commission for further study. This time, staff recommends approval of the rezoning request, and of course, we'll monitor any activity that occurs on that site for compliance with the rules and regulations of the RA district. Staff will stand for any questions. Mike, if you've got anything to add.
Oh, Brad, I think you did a great job at summarizing the issue. I think importantly here tonight, there was, like we discussed, much conversation at the Planning Commission and since the Planning Commission meeting about a possible chipping, mulching operation on the site. Obviously, very understandably, that's of concern for people in the neighborhood, as it is for the city. The trouble is that a giant commercial shipping operation would obviously would not be allowed in the existing zoning, would not enjoy an exemption from local zoning ordinance by state statute, and would not be allowed in the proposed zoning district under the RA or under the existing RO. But some chipping in support of the agricultural use that's taking place on the property. So in support of the tree farm or whatever agricultural use happens on the property, some chipping operation would be allowed, whether the property gets zoned tonight or not, and would also enjoy an exemption from state statute, some chipping operation. So we can't tell you tonight that no chipping is going to take place on the property. We can tell you that if there is a commercial chipping operation that is being proposed, that will require an additional approval from the city. And during the process of that approval will be a public hearing, so the neighbors will get notification. We'll have a similar public meeting with the Planning Commission, during which we can discuss 1,000 different specifics about that operation, the buffering, the noise, the dust, the trucks, the road, all of that would be considered. And if that happens in the future, we can't promise that that won't come up, but there are a million other potential sort of agricultural uses that could take place on the property, all of which would enjoy exemptions under state statute. So the trouble is, agricultural means soybean fields. Everybody understands that. Agricultural also means some forestry uses, and we can get our heads wrapped around that. But also with agricultural comes uses that are in support of the agricultural use. So if you think a soybean field, it's out there growing soybeans for 364 days of the year, but one day you got a big 200 horsepower combine out there with semi trucks, and so you harvest. That would be an activity in support. So I think the important message is there's a separation between our action here tonight or our non-action here tonight and the issue of the mulching. So if that's at least clear, that's kind of what I wanted to be able to clear up a little bit. And Patrick, did you want to mention the ordinance, the parameters of the ordinance?
Yeah, just to remind council, when I prepare an ordinance for rezoning, I always set forth the golden criteria, and golden criteria are named after a case involving a party by the name of Golden from years ago. And in that case, the Kansas Supreme Court determined that when it comes to rezonings, city councils are not permitted just to, make the decision that you think is right, based on a room full of residents. Rather, the council, your decision has to be couched around what are commonly known as the golden criteria, and those are listed in section 1, and they have to do with, compatibility with surrounding properties, several factors, but so those are the criteria that really need to be examined in considering whether to grant or deny the rezoning. So,
Thank you.
Questions from council?
I think most of my questions have been answered. Obviously this is two different issues that we're talking about, that most of the people out here are talking about. And I think clarifying what Patrick just said, that we can't just vote something down because the whole room thinks that it's wrong. Because we are, if the staff report had come in totally different and there was a bunch of negatives, but when the staff report for all these issues are all in a positive, that we're not allowed just to say we're not going to follow by that and vote it down for that reason. So I think, keeping an eye on what's happening out there and keeping the mulching issue a separate issue is probably, kind of understandable.
I have a question. The property directly to the east of this property, what is that zoned at? In the white section along that, what is that?
That is actually not zoned. That's
the Indian land.
yeah, Bureau of Indian.
Yeah, that's my land.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah. So
You
that.
betcha. And that's federal road out there that you're gonna be traveling on and
So
on.
you don't care what they do, what this guy does then?
Yeah, I care. I do care.
Does the Indian reservation care? The
Yeah,
government?
they do.
Are they
They
here
care
for
what
that?
goes on, as long as all the people's happy, no pollution, but there's already been some wrong done right here. And if you look at John's, you can see what they, just let the people speak. I don't mind chopping up, Christmas trees. I mean, I'm glad that he keeps it Christmas tree instead of Happy Holidays myself, And, I'm all fire for the Christmas trees, but dumping trash and stuff like that. And if you look at John's, and if you look at the pictures, there's already been trash dumped on John's land that he don't even own. So if that's the stuff's gonna be dumped there, then look what they might bring in. These people are worried about trees coming in with diseases from other places. There's beetles. There's just all kinds of stuff.
That's not what we're considering. We're considering the rezoning right now. So.
Well, that's what they're looking at. There's nothing wrong with chopping up his own trees on his own property.
That's all I have.
Would that, can I ask a question? Would that follow the special use permit then with the rezoning, with the, what's brought in?
Trash that's already being done.
So the determination we've made is that, and we know, the only thing we know about a conceptual chipping operation is what the applicant himself verbalized during a public hearing at a planning commission meeting. So we don't have all the details, but our understanding is, the determination we've made is that if the chipping operation involves bringing materials from off-site onto the property and chipping them there, we think that would cross a line from in support of an agricultural use to a commercial or industrial use, and would therefore trigger the need for an additional approval special use permit process.
Thank you.
That's what,
I believe that you have to go to KDHE for that.
it could be, yeah, that could be.
Because you
could be right.
We're talking about
that's an
floodwater
open
down
source
there, too.
composting operation is what that is,
Yeah,
and that's
and
that has to be
floodplain
permitted by
impacts
KDHE.
would work into that, you know, they can't store like mulch material in a floodplain, and so there would be thousands of issues that we would wanna
And then that
consider.
is policed by KDHE, and reports have to be sent to KDHE. I'm an open source composter in northeast Kansas. I also own the property that some of this so-called mulch has been dumped on. It's all full of concrete blocks, asphalt, and other things that have nothing to do with agriculture.
Yeah,
It's-
part of the,
it's
that'd be
just
part of the concern
building
of a
materials and
use
stuff.
permit.
And how are you gonna police that?
Yeah.
It's already been
Yeah,
done.
That's already redirecting the creek.
Yeah. It's our, this track here,
But
Well,
just
we
take a
get the
look
time, we
at,
want to
Well,
show you the
just
pictures.
Just to be
And the
clear.
crib
I wanna
may
show
well
you
be
the
involved
pictures.
also.
They don't want that kind of trash out there. I don't blame them. You know, I've done a lot of clay and rock. You know, first you take the good topsoil off, you put in clay and the rock, then you put the black dirt back on.
If you want to speak, we'll have a time to speak, and we'll come up and we'll state our name and address and use the microphone, and we'll gather your comments. We'll limit them to a certain amount of time so that we aren't here all night. But what we're talking about now is the rezoning. And are there any other questions for staff from the council? I guess I've just conceptualized my understanding. The tree operation can continue whether or not it's rezoned. The mulching operation in support of the tree farm or the forestry activity is a legitimate use, and that would continue whether or not the property, or would be allowed to continue whether or not the property is rezoned.
That's correct.
Okay.
Well, which property is that? On which side of the creek are we talking?
Any property,
Any property there?
any of it, all of it.
But it wasn't in the grandfathers of the other, wasn't the other part residential?
Well, okay, point of order. I think I mean, if you want me to answer the questions from the audience?
We're,
It's all
we're considering the rezoning of the 80, the property is outlined on the map, the property owned by Arbor Masters. John Russell's property, or the trust property, is on the other side of the creek, and that's not under consideration tonight by this action.
On the other side, just the tree farm, right?
Well, no, this action does include a portion of property that is on the east side of the creek between.
And that's what
the
people
road
are worried
and the creek.
about.
Yeah.
On there.
Yeah, where's the creek in all
Trash
this?
has already been
The
done.
creek's in the middle of that, is it not?
Yeah, it kind of runs through the middle of that. I don't know how well you can see the blue outline there.
The creek splits the south tract. It's
Yeah, more or less,
the tree
yeah.
farm is wholly on the west side, north, and then it splits the south tract.
You know, that's some floodplain down there too, a little bit.
Yeah.
You know, and
This is
now we're
all
creating
this
an
money.
international deal.
Needs to be
The water
rezoned.
goes to Louisiana, and then it goes to our allies in South Korea.
If you would like to
It's an
address,
international deal here. They just want, you know, they just want some clean, they don't want no dirty dumping down there.
if you would like to make a comment,
You understand?
we're gonna, this is not necessarily a public hearing, but we are allowing public comment. If you wanna make a public comment, please come to the podium, state your name and address, and limit your comments to, say 3 minutes.
It says 4.
It's 4 under the call to public. If you go, we're very lenient in the time, so if you go to 4, we probably won't, over 3, we won't stop you.
but just to, if I could just make an illustration, and I know it may sound strange, but even if the city inspector was here and said, yeah, they're right, the comments are correct, I've identified that they're dumping trash, just the way the legal process is, that would not be a reason for this council to say, well, look, we're not gonna approve your rezoning because we learned you dump trash. Rather, the appropriate thing to do would be to have the code enforcement officer go out there and address it through code enforcement. So it really is just kind of off topic,
And I
about
think
the dumping.
another important clarification is my understanding of the dumping is taking place on property that is not subject to the rezoning.
It's not even owned by the
Yeah,
dumper.
not even
So
owned.
we're
So
not,
it's-
that's an adjacent property.
Right, but they
But not
suppose they
the
might have had
property.
permission. I don't know, by a road. We don't know, you know?
And that's why there are these
It's
criteria,
a mess.
because if, for example, if the council had made that decision based on the dumping, the property owner could challenge it in court and get your decision overturned. So that's why it's important to stick to these criteria, I think.
Okay, I want to say something.
Certainly.
My name's Debbie Hoover, I live at 28142 West 85th Terrace. My concern is, I've driven that road for 20 years. You get up off of 83rd Street and turn onto Cedar Creek, it's a hairy turn.
Yeah.
You rezone that for agriculture, and we have big trucks coming and going. We have high school kids traveling that road. We have a lot of elderly people traveling that road. I have driven past my turn to get home because I have people on 83rd Street going 60 miles an hour on my ass that I've gone down to the tree farm entrance to turn around to get home because I would get rear-ended. So let's put big trucks turning onto Cedar Creek with a hairpin turn, people going 60 miles an hour down 83rd Street on a blind intersection. It doesn't make sense. You are putting people's lives in danger by letting big trucks, and I understand there's a special use permit, all that, I understand it. Who's gonna enforce it? They've already overstepped the boundaries now. Who's gonna enforce it then?
They're
And what are
wanting
you
to
gonna
come
do
through your
about it?
driveway too up there.
And I don't really particularly want to turn that corner going into my neighborhood, which is a very nice neighborhood back there, and look at 5 acres of dumped shit every time I turn the corner to go home. That's what I get to look at when I turn into my nice little forest, community. I get to look at 5 acres of dump. No, thank you. It's not
Here's
what
the
I want
beginning
to
of
look
the
at.
5 acres.
I'm sorry, what was your last name?
Y'all have
Hoover.
it marked out wrong? Yeah, you have it marked out wrong. What you have marked out in the red is this blue line here. Where they're dumping that, the pictures I'm showing you right there, is actually sitting right here
Yeah, that's
on this curve right here.
That's on
It's
my
about to be
property.
pushed off to drive off. It's gonna divert the creek.
Sir, the thing
And
about
that's a bunch of asphalt,
That's not their
concrete right there,
property.
and other trash debris.
That is not their property. They don't have permission
Well,
to
that's
dump
what's been
there.
dumped there.
I know.
Right, but
I
they
know.
dump
They
it.
do not
I'm
have
with you.
permission to dump
I'm with
there.
you. I'm on your side.
They
But
dumped it
there
without
is-
his
There's
permission.
pictures of
Dumping
what
without
they've dumped on
permission.
your property.
So can you imagine what they
Does
dumped
anyone
on
else
their own?
wish to make a comment regarding the rezoning?
I'd like to make one comment
Well,
about the
at
big
least-
truck.
Would you get up and state your name and address, John?
Yes.
If they're gonna dump on his property and they don't even own it, what are they gonna dump on theirs?
Yeah, that.
How'd you like me to put a dump right
I'm John
there, big
Russell, and
one?
I still own the 20
there.
acres that
Turn a few cars
adjoins
over.
83rd and Cedar Creek Road there, okay? And
They got
they've been in there dumping on that property without permission. They've never asked for permission, they just did it, okay? It's full of concrete blocks, asphalt, and all kinds of stuff. Furthermore, it's right there next to the creek. I think you should look at where the creek's at, where all this stuff is gonna be going, is into the creek there, and that's not gonna support the creek. Now, I don't understand the previous question about the big trucks, because if they're just pulling this from their own property, there shouldn't be big trucks coming in. If the rezone, now, it's what you're saying, that, you're just rezoning it, that's not okaying them bringing in big trucks from other properties, they're just gonna be mulching what's on the existing property, correct? So-
Correct.
So, and does that have anything to do with the rezoning anyway? So, and I may want to rezone also if it saves some money in taxes, or if that's what the end goal of this is, on the 20 acres that I still own up there. But I mean, so I guess it's two things here, but I appreciate you letting me talk. Any questions?
Address?
Oh, well, I don't, the property that I own here, I live in northeast Kansas. It's 3304 Street, Wetmore, Kansas, 66550.
Thanks.
It's a couple hours from here.
I
Thank
got
you.
something to say. I'll come up there, tell you that. You know, you think it ain't an issue that what they dumped already? Are you looking at their pictures of what they dumped?
Can I get your name and address?
My name's Jim Euler. I'm a federal sheriff for my federal Indian land.
Address?
Address, Shawnee Reserve 206.
Thank you.
If you need any more requires, you can go to the BIA, Bureau of Indian Affairs. You're an attorney, you can meet some of mine, because I have a couple of them.
Name and address is good.
Good. These people here don't want to dump out there. That's what they don't want. You know, you're rezoning, if you look at the stuff that they already trashed, you know, supposedly that realtor allowed him to do it. Dump that stuff. Do you see the trash? Have you looked at it?
I drove by it the other day, I saw it.
Nobody, have you seen the pictures? At least look at their pictures. That's what they're concerned about. They're concerned about mosquitoes coming out there, you know, and they're concerned about trash from other areas that's got beetles in it and all kinds of stuff. Commercial chippers, you know, they already put mud all over the road one time. Now I put mud on it, but I took it off. You know, one of these days I might zone something out there that you guys might like or you might not like, you know. But at least listen to them what they're talking about. They don't want no trash out there. And the guy already dumped some trash. If he's going to do that, then why wouldn't he dump that on his? You know? As long as he ain't dumping trash. I mean, ain't that what you're concerned about?
Yep.
And the noise.
You know, his Christmas trees, you chop them up. You know,
already
let's
there.
have Christmas trees. You know, but let's don't bring in a bunch of commercial chipping. They don't want it. You know? And my God, they put that trash on black dirt at John's. Hell, I'd love to have some. I'm trying to get black dirt on the rest of my dirt out there. Hell, I can't even buy that. You know, it's hell, $800 a truckload. You know? I'm trying to finish mine up to cover it up. To make it, you know, look good. You know, but they only got so much money. You know, they took all my other money around here. You know, talk about rezoning it. You know, I'm not going back to 1492, you know, and rezoning, you know, taking DeSoto's name. He was a Spanish explorer, right up there with Columbus. It's kind of a disgraceful name, if you look at the history of it. You know? And I'm not asking you to rezone DeSoto back to Indian land right now. So thank you. Believe me, there's a lot more people behind me on this. There's just not too many of them up here. But there's a lot of my family right up here, a lot of Indians. Think the same thing.
Thank you, Jimmy.
What Jim was talking about is the special use permit, not the rezoning.
It's two separate things. So that's what we're trying
They
to
don't want to dump.
Is it
I wouldn't
right?
dump.
Am I correct? The rezoning does not have to, you have not granted a special use permit.
No.
The rezoning does not grant a special
No.
use permit.
No, it would be a whole nother application process and another.
I
hearing
think that's what
process.
people are misunderstanding.
It's
Okay,
already
my
been done.
address
Please.
is 92, 95
I didn't
Cedar
catch
Creek
your name.
Road,
Get
Christy Schneider.
Okay.
And my concern is, and maybe I don't understand this completely, but that's a 17-acre tract, right?
On the east side of the creek is,
Yes,
yeah, roughly.
that's rezoning. Well, I live on 13 acres, and over the 20 years I've been there, I've cleaned off all kinds of trees. I didn't need a commercial chipper, and I didn't need to have my land rezoned for it. So I don't understand why he needs rezoning to clean up supposedly his 17 acres, and I think that's where everyone feels uncomfortable, is that the next step is, then the commercial comes in. What is that true?
Yep.
It's just one step in that direction. That's how I feel, and I think that's how some other people feel. But what is it zoned over where the house is? What is that zoned?
It's zoned RO, so.
The property came into the city from the county. It had an agricultural zoning, I believe, when it was in the county. When that property was annexed into the city, we did not have an agricultural zoning, so it was zoned with the lowest zoning level we had, which at the time was the residential suburban RS, I thought at the time, but.
So it's agricultural, where that barn is and where the house is?
It was always, we owned that property, it was always residential. It's always been residential when we owned it.
That's agricultural there?
Well, it's the whole, there's not a
So
separate
if you-
parcel around the house, I don't
We were
believe.
annexed by DeSoto.
Right.
Well, I was over there talking to one of the owner's wives, And their plans for that barn there is to have events in it, like weddings and stuff like that in that barn. And is that considered agricultural?
No, an assembly use, like a wedding venue in the existing barn
Yeah,
would
like-
likely not be under the umbrella of an agricultural use.
I know, and that's even why more than it makes me think that this is just one step on that 17 acres into getting the special use permit, and then it becomes a big old mulching operation.
Well-
And what do you want, all of us neighbors to sit there and monitor if Arbor Masters brings their trucks in from their work, or if they bring their trucks around from the property? But like I said, I have 13 acres and I never had to have rezoning to clean it up, so it just stinks.
I understand that, you know, there's obviously confusion about why the rezoning.
What's
So
the
nothing
confusion?
nothing about a rezoning is gonna help him in his case for a special use permit for something that's not agricultural.
Does it save tax money?
That's-
Does
No,
it save the
no,
owner
it does
the
not
tax
save
money?
any tax money.
No.
The taxes are based on the use. It matters not what the zoning is, because if you're baling hay off a piece that's an industrial park, but it's not got a building on it yet, you're still paying a,
Well, I
for
guess
what
the
you're
big
getting off of
question,
it.
if you were standing here, is why does he need to rezone it? Why does it need to be rezoned?
Yeah.
If it's so mundane and he just wants to do mulching for himself, why?
I think that's a good question.
It's a very good
yeah.
question. It's
That
the
is a good
number
question.
one
The applicant's-
question.
The applicant's stated intent was to bring the zoning more in line with the historical and intended use of the property. So that it's not zoned residential now, and he's operating a tree farm under residential zoning. Because if he does that, he can, and he can clear the trees and do the tree farm.
How come he don't care what they
But
have to
he
say?
was-
Where's he at?
But he's doing that under an exemption provided by state statute that allows agricultural operations to take place independent of any local zoning ordinance. So he just wanted to bring the zoning of the property in line with the
Yeah,
intention.
see,
That's
I-
his stated intent.
I don't think most of the 25 people that are here believe that.
Right.
It
He's
just-
asking us to rezone it, and it's not even inside the line where he's already dumping.
Well, now, let's make clear, the dumping activities, the point that you pointed to on the map is not part of what he owns, and it's
Right,
not
but he
part-
did it.
Yeah, so.
He did it.
So who do we need to call to turn him in for,
I
I guess
called the
literally-
city 2 weeks ago.
Why
Okay,
should we have
that's-
to call
well,
anyone?
As the city attorney was saying, that may be a city code violation.
John needs
It
to.
might be
You
something
think?
that our
John
code
needs
inspector
to
needs
do
to go out and investigate. We have at least a partial owner here saying he didn't have permission. There's at least
Well, there
another
you go.
partial owner
Call the
somewhere
sheriff.
else that may have given
Yeah,
permission. We don't know.
Right,
I'm
right, he
here-
might
I'm
have
here
did
to
it, but
look-
why
I'm
would he
looking
dump
for
that
help.
kind of trash?
I-
That's
Anybody
not
that
mulch.
sees
Call the
anybody
sheriff
dumping
for it.
over there, call the sheriff.
I'm tired of calling the
Please.
sheriff.
Anyway,
So, and
I
it-
think it lies in the fact that it just looks like one step towards commercial, and that's what it's
I
gonna
don't live
end up
here
as,
anymore, I live
because
in
Arbor
Northeast
Masters
Kansas.
thinks they can push people
I
around.
still own that property in
And
the
that's
corner
what
though.
it's gonna end up
But
as.
he dumped
Mark my
And
word.
it's all dumped on, I've been gone for 2 months and it's already, it's been dumped and burned without permission.
he wants one thing rezoned, but he's dumping on something
Yeah, he's
entirely
dumping
different
on your
already.
stuff, man, and it's trash. It ain't mulch. Look at it. It's an EPA issue.
I'm gonna have to ask you to leave if you're not gonna be respectful
Well, I'll
of
be
other
leaving in a
people's
minute. I thought, well, I've
time.
had enough to say anyway.
We're giving our comments here, not from the audience. Thank you.
My name is David Grodowitz, Grodowitz, because I know you don't know how to spell it. And my address is 8910 Overhill Circle.
Thank you.
I'm not speaking for anybody here but myself. And my concern is, and I understand there's 2 parcels of land, one on one side of the creek, one on the other side of the creek. My concern is, obviously he's dumping on this gentleman's land already because there's Arbor Master flags all over the place over there. So it's not an issue of who's doing the dumping. And his credibility is gone with me. If he would go in, I understand what he's trying to do, I understand he's trying to run a business, and I don't understand all the zoning laws and everything, I don't claim to. But he's already taking advantage of what we're trying to do in good grace. And that's what you should be concerned about, because once these decisions are made, as you know, they're very hard to overturn. And if this person's gonna start abusing those things already, and I'm sorry, if they didn't have the flags all over the place, I could say, I have no idea who put them in there. But it's obvious they did. I've heard people who said they saw them dropping stuff on there, and that's total disregard of the earth. You know, we have a dump for that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Anything else from the council? I'll just state again, the use of the zoning, or the tree farm use of the property is the same whether or not it's rezoned. He's asked for the rezoning. The rezoning meets the golden criteria, as I understand it, from what I've read in the staff report. So it's a lesser zoning. Any future more intense activity requires a special use permit process, whether it would be commercial mulching or special events. So the only decision we need to make is whether or not that property, irregardless of who might own it, would be appropriate were it to be zoned residential agriculture instead of residential RO. So. Would anybody like to make a motion?
I'd like to make a motion. An ordinance number 2435, rezoning the tract of land at 29145 West at 83rd Street from the RO Residential Suburban District to the RA Rural Agricultural District.
We have a motion. Does anyone wish to second the motion?
Yeah, I'll second the motion.
We have a motion and a second. Any further discussion of the motion? Questions? If not, roll call, please.
Lane.
No.
Ritter.
Yes.
McDaniel.
Yes.
Murdoch.
Yes.
Walker.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you all for coming tonight. Next item. Consider awarding demolition project at the wastewater treatment plant, or the water treatment plant. Brad.
All right, thank you, council.
Enjoy your water. Demolition at your water plant. Jeez.
On October 25th,
Can't believe that.
city
Hey, I'll
staff
leave it,
put out
sir.
for bid
See ya.
Bring my trash and dump it.
a package for
I've been down here for more than the last 4 years till we sold the property. Yeah. Yeah. I just found out that yeah, we're going forward with whatever we're going to do. I didn't basically I got a paperwork, basically. I can't believe they're doing it. Yeah, I mean, why would they do that? They don't. They bought our other property, and the property they didn't buy, they're dumping. How can they? It's crazy.
All right.
I don't believe it.
All right, thanks, Rick.
They got the flags out there like they own it. They didn't buy it.
John,
Sorry.
On October 25th, city staff put out a package for demolition of certain items out of the water treatment plant.
I wouldn't have to be.
These items include, there's several tanks in front of the old water treatment building. There's a lime tank, hydrochloric acid tank, which is actually attached on top of the building, and another water treatment type tank out there. There's also a couple of older structures out front of the building that are rather unsightly. None of these items have been used by the city for 20 years, and they're not necessary. So as part of the GO bonds that were issued and approved by the city council in 2015, this was a project that we're moving forward with at this time. On November 30th, the bids were received, and Dale Brothers of Kansas City, Kansas was the low bidder. We did receive 4 bids, and Dale Brothers was the low bidder, $39,020. We also did have a pre-bid meeting where we met here at City Hall, went through the project with our consultant who helped prepare the environmental demolition specification. We also went on site, spent probably 45 minutes to an hour, went through each item for the potential bidders to understand the project. So we feel good about the bids that we got in place, and are recommending Dale Brothers to the council. in the amount not to exceed $39,020. Stand for questions.
This demolishing the old reservoir that's right there on the south side of the building,
Correct, yes.
do you know about that? Have you ever been involved in that?
Well, what we did was our consultant actually went out, we did some depths, because there's water in that basin actually.
Yeah.
And concluded that a lot of it, and they tested the water for any kind of contaminants, they had a list of things. that they
My
looked at.
question is, when they do this, are they going to fill that, to tear out the concrete that's in that, the walls and the floor in that reservoir, or are they gonna leave it there and just fill dirt and stuff in the hole?
They're gonna fill in, they're gonna actually break the concrete, push it in, and then fill in with fill dirt that's brought in from off-site. So there won't be any disturbance, there won't be any materials as far as dirt, things like that, that are generated from.
Did the EPA get involved in that procedure?
We have not contacted the EPA, however.
I don't know how you can let somebody bid that if they don't know what the heck they're gonna do.
Well, they know exactly what they're gonna do, Ron.
Well, you don't, evidently, you're not telling me what they're gonna do.
Well, we had a whole series of tests done, and I can certainly give you the
What-
soil
what
test.
basin are you talking
We
about?
tested the water.
The old water.
Clear well?
Yeah, the clear well.
The clear well where? Under the building?
No, it's on the south side of the building. Used to have a lid over it.
I'm not familiar with the clear well south of the filter building.
Well, I think what you're talking about, actually, I think it's west of the building. It's right when you fall off the street.
On
Is
the
that-
south side of that building.
I am not familiar.
Pull up
with
Earth,
Yeah.
Google
Google
Earth, pull up the
What have
map.
you done with it? Cause I've been in it in 1962.
Well, Ron, to answer your questions, our consultant actually went out and took samples of the water and sent it for lab testing to find out whether it could be just pumped out and into a ditch or, and some of that water is gonna have to be put into a truck and taken to our water treatment plant.
Okay, the clear well under the filters, that's under the building. We're using that.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
We're gonna keep that.
1.1 million gallons straight directly under the filters, under the filter
Are
building.
we talking about this water plant down here? The old water plant? Are we talking about the one?
No, we're out at the.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, we're out at
I
Sunflower.
thought we were talking about.
No, this is out at Sunflower.
Tearing this one down.
No, we're gonna be doing that we're gonna be doing
I
that
thought
this
that's
year,
what
but
this
that's
was
not
all
this.
about.
We're out
No.
at, we're out at.
At the,
Sorry about that.
Oh,
Brad.
that's all right. No, I appreciate your comments.
Okay,
I've been in this one and I've been in the one out of Sunflower.
all right. But in answer to your question, yeah, we're gonna be demoing that building too, and we do need to decide what to do with that.
There's the EPA here. I'm
Okay.
sorry, Brad.
Well, we've also coordinated with SRL, so they're very aware of what we've been doing. Part of what the consultant did also notify KDHE that this project was going on, so we're very confident everything's been done above board and we haven't missed anything, so.
So there is a water basin out there?
Well,
There's a
there is a,
structure, underground structure.
yeah, there's a
with
couple
holding
of them
water.
that have water in them. There's actually, and this, obviously you can't see this one, this right here has water in it, and then this also has water in it. They took samples out of each basin and tested those for metals and other kind of contaminants. And the one in the ones closest to the building, actually it's just found it's just rainwater in those. And so that water can be pumped out into the ditch and just dispersed. The material in the other one did have some metals in it and some other chemicals, so they've recommended, it's in the spec that gets put into a truck and will be sent down to our sewer
Wastewater
treatment,
treatment
our
plant.
wastewater treatment.
And those are old valve vault structures.
Okay.
They're great big and they're deep, but they were water valves in there, 36-inch lines, great valves.
Well, what's gonna happen with those two structures is, the concrete is gonna be broke off, pushed in, and then they will be bringing in fill material from off-site.
The level of the ground.
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Great.
Was there a reason why they're so much cheaper?
Well, yes, there is actually. They, on the structure over here, they understood that all they had to do was take the building off the top and they're gonna leave this foundation. And when we went through, and I went through and asked them about that, and they said, well, we still want to do the job. So, for whatever their reasons were.
Yeah, we gave them the, when we understood, we saw the difference, and we said, there's something amiss, so we called them up, and, it turned out that their bid, it didn't include the foundation removal, so their choices were to withdraw their bid, and then we would have gone with the next low, or they could honor the bid they gave us. So we didn't, we couldn't let them, okay, add some
Right,
price
they
in,
can't change their
so
bid.
they elected to honor the price they gave us, and include the removal of the foundation.
All right. Well, that's no brainer then.
Yeah.
I'll make a motion, we, go with the bid from Dell Brothers for demolition of water treatment plant in the amount not to exceed $39,020.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any questions on the motion? If not, roll call, please.
Ritter,
Yes.
Murdoch,
Yes.
Walker,
Yes.
McDaniel.
Yes.
Lane.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, number C, consider adopting new approval process for a temporary use permit.
All right, thank you, council. This is something we brought before you, actually, I think Mike probably brought it up, and had discussion with the planning commission over a year ago. And, we're finally now getting back around to getting this to the council. Basically, as you know, every time there's a temporary use permit, we go through the process, and we have to bring every one of those to the city council for ultimate approval. That's the direction of council. We wanted to simplify that process and allow for staff to do administrative approvals for certain items. So with that, we drafted or made some amendments, potential amendments to our code that have a semi-public event, which is basically a public event, but it could be on privately owned property, and also public events, which are on basically city-owned property, city parks. And obviously, Miller Park and Riverfest Park are the primary locations for those, even though we do parades, things like that, that also affect the city at large. So upon review of and determination of these two items, we went through the process with the planning commission and held a public hearing. Weren't any real comments. There was a little discussion at the planning commission meeting, and chose to recommend this process to the city council for approval. Upon looking at our definitions and studying in the past year, there's really only one of these that would probably go through an administrative approval, at least the ones that I've listed in the staff report. In previous years, we've had other private, semi-private, or semi-public events, which would have been, the VFW and the Silver Wheel and other places that had events on that property. In this past year, it really was a very good example because we didn't have those types of events. They were all on either at the city parks or at Riverfest Park. So upon looking at that, we decided that perhaps in either council's direction, we could go back to the planning commission and have them discuss whether or not we could include or exclude city parks from the approval process required by the council and make that administrative, or if you'd like to keep it this way and have anything that's in city parks, whether Riverfest Park or Miller Park, come before the council. So that's kind of where we're recommending. We'd like to have it go back to the planning commission and take a look at.
Take another swing at it.
Yeah, exactly. But if you like the fact
We needed
that.
some direction though.
Yeah, but if you.
Yeah, I think the initial intent was for these stuff that happened at Beer 30 and the Silver Wheel. The trouble for them, when they're organizing this event, a lot of stuff happens at the last minute. And, they're not familiar with the city process, and so they come, a week before the event, and they find out they need a special use permit. And we would like, for stuff that happens on private property, we think it'd be appropriate for that to be an administrative approval. And the thought was at the time, we had 4 or 5 of those a year. And
Right.
like last year, we only had the one. So the thought was, let's just separate out private property from public property. But looking at the list now, the feedback we'd like to get from you is, how comfortable would you be if the temporary use permit stuff was administrative approval? So things like the barbecue contest that EDC puts on, or the wine song festival, or you start talking about the Soto days, and that one really seems like something that should come to council, because we're closing the street, it's a multi-day event, it's a big thing.
Right.
Where's that line? Maybe you're okay with, if we've got a movie night down at Miller Park. Okay, remember that a couple of years ago? It wasn't a terribly big event, it was a one-night thing. Maybe that could be an administrative thing, but the larger event. So I'm not sure where that trigger lies and where your comfort level is with that. If you don't mind the applications coming, fine. Most of the ones that happen in public property are known far enough in advance because they have to.
They understand the process, they've been through.
They do.
And
they have to reserve the park.
Right.
In advance. So just some feedback on that would be helpful.
Yeah, when I talked to Brad, we were looking at it, it seemed to me that if you you could exclude like a city park or city hall if it didn't involve any road closures or any, that was it. It just involved city parks or city hall, which we have a lot of events at, then perhaps that would be, again, as Mike says, up to you guys, but it would be something staff could approve. But then any other item, any other events that, you have street closures, or, it's where there could be potential for traffic jam, if you're having some large event that maybe streets aren't closed, but you're expecting, 1,000 or more people, is that something you would want to come up to the council?
Well, as long as I've been on, I've never seen us not approve a temporary use permit. And so basically, when they do come to us, we're kind of looking at staff's take on whether things are appropriate or not appropriate. I think there's advantages of it, you keep an eye on what's going on in your parks and what's going on in your community. It's in our face, we see it, we know about it. Nobody knew about this type of thing. If you're watching these city council meetings, you should know what is coming up and what is happening. It gives us control over what's happening in our parks or on our property. But like I said, it
could almost go like to the consent agenda, it's maybe administrative approval with a consent agenda, and then if a council person had a question or concern, then we can pull it off and discuss it.
That would maybe be a really good idea. That way it's brought in front of us, so that if we do have some questions or objections or something about it, it's not passed over totally. I like that idea, Rick.
Yeah.
Well,
I do like, go ahead, Nick.
So the safety concerns about it too, that.
Right, if you see something in their safety plan that you don't
Yeah.
think is fully addressed, then you can
Yes, sir.
bring that up and have it.
Yeah.
I do kind of like the private events being administrative only. Or the semi-public, I guess, they're not private, semi-public, whatever they were.
Semi-public on private property.
On private property.
Yeah.
I think that.
I feel the same about that could be administrative.
Yeah, it's more impact to the applicant, because Connie comes in and she's in a panic, and it's 2 weeks before, and it's oh no, and it's, that'd help with that sort of thing.
Well, and just having to come in an evening, certain
Right,
days
exactly,
just to do an
yeah.
event is just, it's probably not necessary. And even with, being on the consent agenda, a lot of these, that we do every year, having to come up and be here, it's probably not usually necessary, although it would be nice, that we see it, but.
It'd still be nice to know about the events though, to the council.
Well, that's why I think it's a great idea that, what I see the they wouldn't necessarily be on the consent.
They wouldn't be on there.
So they would be in your notice to us or whatever.
Yeah, a monthly note that has been approved by staff. To the council.
The communication sort of thing.
Yes.
That'd
Which would probably be in
important
your
to do.
weekly or monthly reports.
Weekly report or
Right.
something
Give some
that
of the
staff has
monthly-
approved.
I call them periodic.
Periodic
so
reports.
Periodic.
Periodic reports, too.
There's nothing
Perfect
to report, we
information.
don't want to do a report.
That's right. Well, if that's what I'm hearing is sort of the structure we have is pretty much okay.
Right, yeah.
And it's just kind of, let's just put it on the consent agenda rather than the regular, so the text amendment would, you're fine with.
I think so.
Yeah.
I thought it
It proceeds as written.
All right, one other thing I'd like to point out, we did change the fee structure.
No
There was
fee?
some confusion, we didn't change the amount, that's obviously set by the council, but what we have now is, we call it a permit fee, and actually what we've changed it to is an application fee, so when the application comes to my desk, it needs to have a check with it. Now, the applicants always have the opportunity to come back before the council and say, could you refund that money? And we'd certainly be supporting any kind of efforts that they may choose to bring before the council. But we want to make that clear that it's an application fee,
Not a permit.
not a permit fee.
Well, and the other thing that we're gonna make a concerted effort to do is not have every single one of these ask you guys to waive the fee. I think doing it administratively, that's a no-brainer. We can't even ask the council to waive the fee.
Right.
If it's on the consent agenda, I think there's a way we could administer that such that, well, it's gonna be on the consent agenda, we don't have a policy of waiving fees. If you want, if you're a local civic organization, you can look at the donations policy maybe. But for the most part, we really want to curtail the time after time and waive the fees, that whole business. We'd rather not put you in a position of having to do that each time.
It would be nice to get away from.
And the fees are nominal enough. I don't think they're, terribly
And we have
impactful.
some that pay consistently, and then we have some that always ask.
I'll do it.
It would be better just to.
Well, I mean,
Yeah, right. Okay.
Okay.
So we can still, were there specific items you thought that the planning commission needed to relook at, or?
Well, that's what we were talking about, if you wanted to not allow administrative
Okay.
approval for public events on city property, like Riverfest or Mill Park, that can be administrative. That's what we were thinking about, bringing it back to the planning commission.
So then I think otherwise then we're good now to approve the text amendment.
Yeah, I think what I'm hearing is, let's just, instead of that, let's put it on the consent agenda.
Definitely put it on.
Yeah.
So as written, we're okay to approve this.
Yeah.
Ordinance 2436.
You good? I make a motion, we approve ordinance number 2436, adopting the planning commission's recommendation to revise the DeSoto zoning regulations to amend the procedure required for approval of the temporary use permits.
I'll second that.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Any questions or discussion of the motion? If not, roll call, please.
Lane.
yes.
McDaniel.
Yes.
Walker.
Yes.
Ritter.
Yep.
Murdoch.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. Consider final plat for Arbor Ridge Townhomes.
All right, thank you, council. In August, the Arbor Ridge Townhomes tract was brought before the planning commission and rezoned to R2, which is basically a duplex, 2 homes per lot. There was also a preliminary plat with that request, which was also approved by the planning commission. The Arbor Ridge Townhomes contains 18 lots with 2-unit duplex residences for each lot. Staff has been through our checklist for final plats. We made some minor corrections, presented those to the applicant, those have been made, and we are now recommending approval of the easements and rights of way for the Arbor Ridge Townhomes final plat. Also like to point out to your attention, we do have a vacation for a sanitary sewer easement that was highlighted in your packet in yellow. Basically, there's an existing line that's actually active, but to allow for more cost-effective hookups for the townhomes, the applicant asked us to redirect those, and we went through. Mike took a look at the piping system and make sure everything was appropriate. Also, Doug Smith looked at it as well. in addition to the consultant that designed it, so it's been scrubbed pretty thoroughly. And we're recommending that you approve the rights-of-way and easements and vacate the sanitary sewer easement as shown on the final plat.
Okay. Any questions for Brad? Somebody want to make a motion?
Yeah, I'll make a motion that we approve. Is there an item number on this? It's just final plat, Barber Ridge Townhouse final plat.
Okay. Motion and second. Roll call, please.
Walker.
Yes.
Murdoch.
Yes.
McDaniel.
Yes.
Ritter.
Yes.
Lane.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay.
Thank you.
I would gladly give up the podium, thank you.
Item E. Consider issues related to solid waste collection in the city.
Yes, the council, I think this is Patrick's.
Patrick?
Yes, it is. So several things here. The first item really is kind of independent of the contract that we'll talk about here in a moment. What I did was just go through our regulations, and really a lot of it was just sort of cleaning things up, making the regulations more accurate as to you know, what we currently do. I also added in provisions where delinquent solid waste bills can be put on the taxes of a parcel of land. There's a particular statute on that. You have to follow a process for that, so that's included. So the first ordinance is simply amending the city code to implement these provisions. And as I said, there's really not any big substantive changes to the regulations, more just tailoring it to our practice, you know, with the recycle and then the refuse containers provided by the contractor, things of that nature. So I will be happy to answer any questions about the ordinance amending the regulations.
Questions for Patrick on the ordinance? That'd be 2437.
Yes.
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance 2437, amending the city's solid waste regulations contained within Article 4 of the chapter, whatever it is, 15 of the DeSoto City Code.
I'll second it.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Questions? Roll call.
Walker.
Yes.
McDaniel.
Yes.
Murdoch.
Yes.
Ritter.
Yes.
Lane.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay. The next item then is the contract with Honey Creek.
Yes, council. The existing contract that we have with Honey Creek, I believe expires the end of this year. Of course, we, you know, if you don't approve tonight, we certainly could, you know, just continue under the current contract we have, assuming Randy would be good with that, to give you more time to consider this. But it may allow Randy to come to the podium to explain, but in a nutshell, the rates are going up. We haven't had an increase on solid waste rates for quite some time here in DeSoto. So we did work with Mike, and I met with Randy. I've talked to him quite a bit. The contract that was requested was a 10-year contract. But keep in mind, it does have the provision that if there was not funding, then the city could end the contract without penalty, and that allows us to do a multi-year contract without violating the cash basis law. I believe Honey Creek has done a similar contract with the city of Eudora for a 10-year period. And just in big picture terms, the residential rate is really where most of the increase is, and Randy has explained that really the commercial rates, even though there haven't been increases in those rates, that those are in line with what they should be, but the residential rate has been artificially low for several years now. So Randy, why don't I'll just open it up if you want to address any issues I didn't.
We hadn't had a price increase in 10 years, so there's been no changes to the solid waste price in 10 years. So from January of 09 to January of 17, we've seen, this is Bureau of Labor Statistics, in solid waste collection, we've seen a 19.6% increase, which comes to about almost $3. So we're looking at $2.50 is the increase that we're looking at.
Might also add, council, we are going to bring the billing all within the city. Right now, Randy actually bills Clearview City for the dumpsters they have, and per this contract, any money by any customer in the city, that money will flow through the city. There won't be any direct bill unless a customer could call Honey Creek, you know, if they have a something extra they want hauled off. That would be the only situation, but other than that, it'll all be billed. So there will be an increase in activity on the part of the city in doing the billing. The contract does allow that to be done on or before April 1st of this year. And I know Bonnie's already talked to Randy about transitioning that over. In the fee resolution, which is down the agenda, we are proposing a $1 administrative fee that would go to the city, and that's extremely low when you look at other communities that Honey Creek serves.
Anywhere from $2 to $3.50 is what other communities charge, where there's like a solid waste fee.
And also on the, and I know it's come up in the past, there may be a sentiment that, gosh, why shouldn't we bid this out? And really it comes down to service. So if you went out to bid on solid waste and the low, you would pretty much have to go with the low bid. The way bidding works now, you couldn't, if the low bid was slightly under Honey Creek, you could not say, well, gosh, we've got such a good history with Honey Creek, we're just going to adopt their bid. You'd have to go with that low bid, and if it's somebody that hasn't served the city or you don't know a lot about them, you're kind of taking a risk on the service. If it turns out the service is not good, then the trash collection, just being familiar with other communities, it really does turn ugly quick if you don't have good service.
Yeah. Okay. Any questions from council?
No, I'm just glad, I hope that the once a month large item pickup carries on.
Yeah, there's absolutely no changes whatsoever.
Do people need to call you on that?
What?
They have 4 of those items, does it make it easier if they do?
No, I mean, we run all the streets anyway.
Your truck runs and calls back to the shop and says there's a large item at this.
So that's what we basically do. There's another truck that runs through to do it, so.
Rick, I have a couple questions. Okay.
Sure, go
So the 250 raise, is that just for the flat raise? Is that for additional, is it this $3 cost, of, you know, for their additional containers, or is it 250?
That's always been the $3 for
Okay, so
additional
it's staying the
container,
same.
that's staying the same. The only increase would just be to the base rate, which was, is $14.97 or $14.96 currently, would go to $17.50.
Excellent, excellent. Then my second question is on this, the other page that talks about 3 annual events. What 3 annual events are these?
Yeah, let's kind of.
Well, we've always done wine song, we've done the fireworks down at River, then
And DeSoto.
basically pretty much DeSoto days. And then there's been other events that we always do for the city too.
Yeah, I think the 3, I'm not sure where the 3 came from, but whatever big event happens, they do.
Yeah. So we,
That's not true though, I think, because I know one event pays like $1,100 or something for like a dump off, roll dump off, and some other stuff. So I was just trying to figure out why we do for some and then not for
Yeah.
others.
what was that event, do you know?
I believe it was one of the barbecue contests, but I don't know if that specific number's correct, but I do.
I know this year there was no charge.
There's no charge?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah,
No,
we
I'm
did-
just
we
trying
did
to
it
make
for
sure
no
that,
charge.
Well, that's a good point.
Yeah.
I mean, if we do it for, so DeSoto Days makes sense that
Right.
we do that for that one. 4th of July, obviously, that's our
Yeah.
event. Maybe the others, I mean, I don't.
We did the barbecue, I know, no charge for the barbecue.
okay.
Well, I know
I
they
just,
do wine song, but
Yeah.
that we've always contacted them on our own and taken that as a sponsorship to
Yeah.
us, not
Yeah.
knowing anything about
Yeah.
this part of it, but I
Okay.
mean, they've helped us always with that.
Well, we need to square that
I
up.
just wanted to make sure that we were good to all, and that we didn't leave some other events out there. So-
well, I just in putting I understood that you wouldn't want it open-ended. You're essentially saying, look, for 3, we'll do it free, but then after
Yeah.
that,
Do discretion on, yeah.
I get it.
but
I
there's-
mean,
yeah.
Because
So-
2 of those events aren't city events that we truly don't run. We
Yeah.
run the fireworks show, we truly don't run the city, the Soto days.
That's right. I mean, the 4th of July is really our only, that's our only big event.
Then all the city dumpsters and stuff are no charge also.
for regular
Yeah,
operations.
for regular operations.
Yeah.
No, that's
But,
great.
no,
No,
I mean,
I'm not trying to discredit
Oh, no,
anything.
no, I was just saying
I
that's
just- I'm just
also
trying to make
yes.
I'm just saying we shouldn't pick our events over one or the other.
I
I
agree.
mean, it does make it a little vague the way it's worded, so do you wanna, Mike, any thoughts on, do you just wanna have the
Well,
the
the-
one event, or just leave it totally out and?
Do we break them down, or?
I think the 3 makes sense. We just need a policy as to how we handle the others. You know, we got one.
Well, I think they would be considered city events that I mean, if they're gonna still continue to
Yeah.
say, oh yeah, wine song, we're gonna still do you, but we have
Yeah.
never done it because of anything with the city, we've just
No.
always contacted
Yeah,
them.
exactly.
Same with barbecue, if it's the
Yeah.
chamber doing it, I mean, but you never know, in the future, the city may have another event, cause, you know, I've got lots of ideas. So, you
Yeah.
know, we may need another event, and then it would be there already, so.
Well, so then the number 3.
Yeah, let's leave the 3 as is.
I say just leave it now, it could always be adjusted if it needed to,
Let's
we
leave
could
it.
always change something
Yeah,
in the
leave
future
it.
on it.
And then take a look at all the events and see how.
Right, because I just don't
Yeah.
want to be selective for any one
Yeah.
event that we, over the other. I just think.
You're right, we can't pick and choose who has to pay for trash service.
I mean, because, you know, and also like the sheriff's department, we talked about, you know, we pay for them for the Soto days, but we don't pay for them for our other events, you know, so.
Yeah.
I just have concerns with some of that.
Yeah.
You guys do a great job.
They're all great events.
Thank you, I appreciate
And
it.
they do
Fought that
great
Thank
one
you.
last week, didn't they?
Yes,
Been
windy
very
days are never
pleased.
good.
Your service
Ten
is
extra
good.
days out of
Thank you, I
Christmas.
appreciate it.
I did
Yeah.
not. I've learned a lot out of this.
Yeah.
Thank you. You
Oh,
do a
yeah,
great
we-
job.
during Christmas and New Year's.
At Christmas?
I'm very happy. with
I
this.
didn't know that till I read this, I know.
Yeah, I've had to go
Yeah,
to
we've always
all
done
the
it, so
neighbors
anything
and
that's
stuff.
out, even boxes, whatever it is, they clean it all up for the 2 weeks.
Be prepared to get some.
Randy, just so you know, you're on video.
And we just set those next to the, we just set next to your
Yeah.
normal?
Yeah, just set it up.
Well,
Take
thank
care
you
of
for
it.
your service. It's always
Thank
been
you.
great.
Any other questions for Mr. Will? All right.
I make a motion, we authorize the mayor to sign the contract for solid waste collection with Honey Creek Disposal.
I'll second that.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Any questions? Roll call.
Lane,
Yes.
Ritter,
Yes.
McDaniel,
Yes.
Murdoch,
Yes.
Walker.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, the next item then is to approve the fee resolution implementing the new solid waste rates.
Yes, Council, I would just also caveat, I don't know if you noticed, but there's also a custodian of records fee that I stuck in there, having nothing to do with refuse. It's just,
I saw that.
yeah, just putting down what we charge for copies for open records requests. We've been getting a fair amount of those, and we haven't always charged, but I know Mike and I agree, probably a good idea that, when those requests come in, that we do charge for the copies and any staff time.
Right.
So,
Yep. Agreed.
with that, I recommend approval of the fee resolution.
And that's resolution number
946, I
46,
believe.
yeah, 945. Motion?
I'll make a motion, we approve resolution number 946, establishing fees and rates for permits, license services within the city of DeSoto.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Roll call, please.
Walker.
Yes.
Murdoch.
Yes.
McDaniel.
Yes.
Lane.
Yes.
Ritter.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, approved letter to be sent to city businesses who are using solid waste, contractors that are not under contract with the city.
Yes, council, even with the city code regulations prior to the revisions that you approved earlier in the meeting, we've always had an exclusivity provision in our regulations that, all solid waste within the city has to use a city contractor, and that's fairly typical. The thought behind it is that you don't want a bunch of different trash trucks on the streets, less days that there's hauling. So just over the years, there have been businesses in town, probably because they didn't know about the requirement, that have contracted with their own provider. And so the purpose of this letter would be to give businesses a year time period.
Okay.
To come into compliance, and I tried to make the letter, very gentle, that, this is just something we're trying to get compliance with. So with your approval, we'd like to send out the letter that we included in the packet.
Do we have any idea of the number of businesses that?
It wasn't that
I think there's
many.
about 6, maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, any questions from council?
Is there a great increase in rates between those two? For the consumers?
Hard
to say.
It's hard to
We
say.
don't know what their contract is.
What they're getting.
We have no idea.
I mean, the most recent situation that Randy and I dealt with was actually a business that wanted to get out of the contract. It was with Deffenbaugh, but Deffenbaugh was saying, and I wind up talking to Deffenbaugh to point out to them that we have these provisions that you're not, so I think there are some of those situations where, businesses might want to get out of their contractual commitment to another provider. But,
We were lower in price on that one too.
but I think a lot of these contracts are boilerplate. You're in for 5 years, and then there's another renewal for 5 years.
And if you don't call on a certain day, then it automatically renews.
But if I would just say, if there's a business that has a real big issue, like they're in a 10-year contract, I think we'll try to work with them. I think Mike is open to that. It's not, and we'll bring anything to your attention that, if someone has, super big deal about it, that would be something we'd bring back and talk about.
I make a motion, we approve the letter regarding the collection of solid waste in DeSoto.
Okay, motion is second. Any discussion? Roll call, please.
Murdoch,
Yes.
McDaniel,
Yes.
Lane,
Yes.
Ritter,
Yes.
Walker.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, item F, CIP discussion.
Yeah, last week. I don't have a whole lot on this tonight, council. I think at the last meeting, we decided to, push our time frame back just a little bit. But initially was hoping to get this wrapped up by the end of the year, but I think that was kind of an arbitrary self-imposed deadline. We do want to have the capital improvement plan approved before we really get deeply into our budget deliberations for 2019, which will start probably in late February. The only new information I have for you is on the staff report, the online survey that we talked about. And Rick was nice enough to put me in contact with a local, does he live here in DeSoto?
He's on the Shawnee side.
Yeah, this is his business, is crafting these surveys, so he helped me with some of the wording on this, but just to get additional public input about the scope of the plan and the particular projects involved. So what's attached to your staff report is an online survey that I've crafted, and I'd like to go public with that tomorrow. I don't think I need a formal approval from you, but if you have read through that, if you have any suggestions or thoughts about that, be happy to discuss those tonight. The intent is we'll pick this up. I think I want to have the survey live for a good 30 days, so that'd put us at the end of January. And at that time, probably before that time, be crafting some of the responses, some of the feedback we've gotten from public input into the CIP to talk about that then in February. Hopefully by the end of February or early March, be in a position where we can approve the plan.
Okay,
So that was
Then
it.
you'll give the staff report at that time.
Yeah. Well, right, so probably won't have much at the first meeting in January. We'll be switching, having new council members come on. And then, in February, we'll keep it on the agenda. So late January, maybe have the results of the survey back to share with you. Maybe have some revisions to some project scopes and priorities, and then, be able to seriously have an end run at it in February. That's my
Okay.
thought.
any comments on Mike's question survey?
Okay, good.
Put it out there.
We'll do it, yep. And you're all invited to take the survey too. You're not, once, please.
Executive session, any items for executive session?
I don't think so.
Okay. Advisory reports, Mike?
I have one reminder that the next council meeting will be swearing in new members and bidding a fond farewell to our outgoing members. That is January 8th, that's a Monday, so don't forget about the 4th, the meeting on the 4th, move back to the 8th. Anticipate a relatively light agenda for that evening, and so the council packets, I was thinking that the council packets would still go out on the Friday before. That just gives you the weekend. If there's any thoughts about that, I think it would be a little bit hard for us to get it too much because there'll be vacations, the New Year's and Christmas between now and then. If we want to bump that up to the 3rd, we could probably handle that.
I think as long as it's a light agenda, it should be plenty of time.
Okay. if
Don't put
everybody's
anything
comfortable with
crazy or controversial
it. We'll
on
be
the
rezoning
agenda.
tree farms.
It'll be good.
It's a special use permit.
Yeah.
No, we're not, no, we
All
won't
right.
be taking that up. And then I will be taking off the week between Christmas and New Year, so next week I'll be out of the office, but in town.
You'll answer your phone and email.
It depends on who calls. Yeah, that was.
No. You say, no, I won't, I'm on vacation. All right. Brad? Oh, no, I skipped Patrick, sorry.
Nothing for me.
All right.
I just want to remind you, planning commission is canceled for December, so that's the only thing I had.
Okay, council comments. Kevin, anything tonight?
No, I discussed a couple items with Mike earlier.
Okay. Lori?
I just have one quick question as a reminder to myself. Can you remind me what we decided for sure about the sidewalk situation out at, the housing development where Dave Anderson is at? I don't know what it's called out there.
It's Oak Country.
Oak Country
What was our,
Estates.
I had somebody asking me about that, and then I went back to try to find the minutes from that meeting, and I can never find
Yeah.
meeting minutes, cause it was like, I thought I went through everyone this year, and it was never there, so.
So it was, the last time we discussed it was 2016.
So I didn't go back.
Yeah, and you know, the background issue is that, the developer didn't wanna put sidewalks in when the streets were being built. So there was and Patrick, correct me if I've strayed.
No, you're correct so far.
So far. There was an agreement with the developer that he could start building houses on the lots, but before the last house in the subdivision was built, the sidewalks had to go in. And there's a provision that would allow the city to trigger a benefit district to install the sidewalks if that didn't happen. And so, when we discussed, that was from '06 or so, that agreement had been in place historically. And then, I think we discussed it, at least staff discussed it internally at one point in between then, but then in 2016, I think Dave came with maybe Chris Johnson, who's the real estate agent representing the property, and asked for that requirement to be changed or waived. I don't remember what the ask was.
Probably waived.
I think it was waived,
Just
they wanted to
waived.
eliminate
Just
sidewalks.
no sidewalks.
As I recall.
Right, and at that time, the council said, thanks, but no, we'll stick with the agreement that's in place. Is that,
Yeah, the message that I think Mike and I agreed is we can't just do away with them because it was zoning, but what I had proposed is that we could simply suspend the requirement until the council wanted to do a benefit district, which may never happen. But when we presented that to you guys, you said, no, we don't wanna do that, which meaning we still want the requirement on the developer as it has been, so.
I'm sorry, so I misspoke. The current
So
agreement
we
doesn't
don't
have anything about a benefit.
district. The reason I ask is because I had somebody that lives out there come ask me about it, and, was wanting me to, think about not voting for this benefit district, and that, they must be getting close to time where
They
this
are.
is gonna
They
be
are.
happening, and
Yeah.
it must be the residents'
That don't want the sidewalk.
understanding that, right, they're like, we don't need the sidewalk.
Right.
We don't want the sidewalk. Well, because it's their understanding that they're gonna be the ones paying for it now. And so that's why I was trying to figure out exactly what to tell this lady,
Okay. Well,
and that was, and I can come back and talk to you more about it another time. I just was trying to refresh my
no,
mind.
well, then, yeah, because Patrick, I misspoke. The current agreement doesn't have anything about a benefit district. It just says, before we issue that permit for that last lot, that sidewalk's gotta be in. And if our inspector shows up and it ain't in, there's no permit. Right?
I think you're right, but I wanna check tomorrow,
Hey,
but
let's
I'm
check,
pretty sure
So
that.
Because
if
I
we can
think
just
you're right,
find
the
that out,
agreement-
so
the
that I can
agreement-
clarify the right
But there would be no
information
cost
there.
to the people there, it's just on the developer.
Right.
Unless he makes an agreement with them.
Exactly, their individual purchase contract could have the requirement in that when the sidewalk goes in, they have to pay, I mean, very well
Could be.
could. I mean,
Could be.
there's
Yeah, they
no-
could have it.
There's no reason why it wouldn't, I mean, the developer would assume all that risk unless he.
I guess it was a
So
thought
I
of
mean-
mine that, when we do stuff like that, sometimes it can backfire on the wrong people at the end then. If
Well,
it goes to the
right.
fact that we allow a benefit district, well, now people that, are, it just seems kind of, the contractor was up for it, and then all of a sudden the people there are gonna be required to pay for a
Right.
sidewalk.
Well,
If
so
that's the
to
case.
that degree, and I know when you sign on a house, you get a stack of papers this thick, but there are, the covenants about that sidewalk are, is my understanding, with restrictions on each lot in that subdivision. It's shown in that
It's in that
paperwork.
paperwork.
Now, understand,
Right, right.
you
Okay.
might not, just because it's there doesn't mean you know about it.
So, this particular person that I was talking to, just refer her maybe to Patrick to come
Yeah,
discuss
I'll be
this.
here tomorrow, or
I mean, it might not be tomorrow, it
I
might
could
be later.
email you. It's no big deal.
I mean, it's not a big
Yeah.
hurry, but I just wanna know who's gonna, if you understand, I mean, who's the most knowledgeable about it, one of you.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't have those answers, I mean, she's just telling me not to allow something to happen, but we're like, well, yeah, but we don't wanna start not allowing sidewalks. I mean, we can't, just cause you don't want it, you know, you're not speaking for
And
the whole
I
city.
did have a conversation with Dave recently about it, and you know my conversation was that you know it was a pretty recent decision that the council made in 2016, and I didn't feel comfortable from a staff level bringing that back up for another choice,
Right,
you know,
right.
because that's just
Yeah.
not
Because
good
we made the
policy.
decision,
Yeah.
yeah, okay. So the only other thing that, you know, I'm gonna make a comment on, even though I know you don't wanna hear this, is whatever is happening out on that corner of 83rd Street and Cedar Creek, I hope we can,
Yes.
you know,
Yeah.
look into that and decide what's happening. And, I don't know if it's possible, but if it is, I'd like to suggest if there's a way we could send some kind of formal letter to this homeowner, or I mean, this new owner of this property, just, you know, clarifying exactly our understanding of what he's doing on that property and what he can't do, and that, you know,
Yeah.
I just don't, you know, I just want them to always, you know, let them know that people are watching them, I guess, not us necessarily, but I don't want trouble, you know, to me, it is still what it has always been at Christmas Tree Farm.
Yes.
And it may grow into more, but not all the more is negative. You know, an event center may not be a negative thing. Mulching probably is because of the location that we're seeing it at, but I'm just hoping that maybe they can be kind of upfront with us with, you know, their plans so that we can, you know,
Right.
keep everything pretty, friendly amongst everybody here. I don't wanna write it, cause you did a much better job of putting words in it.
Well, we certainly have a potential code violation to follow up on.
Right.
You know, based on the information we got.
Why didn't the owner of that property, why hasn't he come to us?
But he's not even, it's not even on his property where the code violation tends to be.
That's right.
That's
Is
why
where
you're
the
gonna
and
see
there's-
why
all
the guy
of
owns
this
it
is.
hasn't complained.
Yeah, cause I noticed several piles out there. That's
Who's out of town?
He was here tonight. Mr. Russell.
He was here tonight, but he
Part
has
owner.
said he hasn't been back to look at the site for several months, so.
Hey, the coast is clear, you can leave now.
We've been waiting.
Danny?
No, none.
None tonight?
None.
Thank you.
Ron, might be your last chance.
Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
You have to come to the
You
next
guys-
meeting so we have a quorum to get started.
Yes, you do.
All you gotta do is, all you have to do is say to him, Rob, are you in? He'll say, yeah, I'm in.
We can't start the meeting without you, Ron.
We need
If
you
have
on.
4 people here, you can.
Oh, why would you not wanna come to the most,
I could be
most
sick
enjoyable
in the
one for
hospital
you?
In Florida.
Ron,
The
you
most
need to come.
enjoyable one
I
for
may not
you.
make
You're
the
not
next
going to
meeting.
Florida.
You better come, Ron.
Well, the only thing I wanted
I'll furnish the peppermint.
No, I'm not coming because I can't get a pen.
Yeah, I'll fill that thing up with peppermints, I promise.
I just wanted to make a note that we investigated the codes violation that Lori,
Yeah.
let's follow through on that and make sure and I do like the idea of, writing a letter to the property owner, stating our understanding of their operation and the legitimate uses of the property, and we welcome them.
Yeah, okay.
Good.
I was at Hope Safety here tonight.
Well, he was.
He was
Is he the one that got up and left?
Yeah, I think they got
The
left.
two front.
So,
Three policemen there.
I guess the other thing I'd add is Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to everybody, and I'll take a motion.
I'll make a motion, we adjourn.
Okay. Ronnie, you second that last
All
one?
in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, we're adjourned.
Thought he'd wanna do this last one. Have a good Christmas.
Who got the second on
Merry
the
Christmas.
You guys do it.
Ron wants it.
Ron wants it, don't you?
All right, you got it.
That second, Ron?
He did, he made the second.
You missed all the fun.
Yeah, I'd hate to take that away from Ron.
Should've been here earlier.
He was here.
He was.
Weren't you here?
Yeah.